You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-host Kevin. Alex, he's not going to be with us tonight. He has got some traveling going, and hope he's having some fun time off there. So, Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. So, it's we are basically the middle of July already. The countdown is on. Like, it is generally it's basically somewhere 30 to 45 days before your home league drafts is basically where we're at, depending on if you guys do it before the preseason or as the preseason winds down or right before season kicks off or whatever. But, it's that 30 to 45 day range and until you're drafting, which is even better because that means you're about 50 days away from the start of the regular season. And that's what we love to see.
Absolutely. Speaking of, drafting and all that good stuff, the player profile videos, they're really starting to take shape here. We're making our way through it and working diligently to get those things up ready for you guys. So that way you get those little bite-sized nuggets when you're on the clock, getting ready to fully rock and roll there. So make sure that you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Click that subscribe button over there. That way you're getting all those notifications when those videos are dropping, and you can get those little refreshers without having to go back through and find the specific player we've been talking about all summer here. So certainly help you guys out there and help you guys get rocking and rolling there. But some interesting teams to break down tonight, right? We're going to hit up the Chargers. We're going to hit up the Cowboys. Lots of fantasy relevance on both of these teams, kind of up and down the roster here. We are certainly, you can tell we're starting to get into some of these teams that have the higher powered offenses here when you're talking about, there's not really a position where, there's not some fantasy relevance there on an entire squad. So, definitely lots of fun and lots of good stuff going on here. Any news or notes that you've seen that we probably should take care of before we dive in here?
We're waiting for what the league does, but Alvin Kamara pled no contest to a misdemeanor stemming from the altercation a year and a half ago at the Pro Bowl there in Las Vegas. So no felony charge, like I said, a misdemeanor, but the league is going to do what the league does. So the good thing is, before most teams draft for redraft season, we should have an idea of if Alvin Kamara is going to miss time or if he's going to be a full go this season.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly something that we'll find out. And that's for fantasy news. That's a good thing here, because I believe that the trial and all that had gone to that. I didn't believe that was set to kick off until, beginning of August type of thing. So that part's at least settled. Now we'll see what the league does, and I imagine that the league will make their ruling here sooner than later. So we'll certainly know on that one there. Anything else kind of standing out there in the news and notes section?
No, nothing yet. We still got some free agent hangouts, right? We still got some big name running backs that aren't on teams. Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, Zeke Elliott.
Right.
Waiting to see what's going on there. DeAndre Hopkins still hasn't signed, so we're still, kind of waiting to see where he lands. I expect all of these guys to end up on a team by the time the season kicks off, but where and when and kind of how that's going to play into said team's offensive game plan this season has eluded us so far.
Right. And, you mentioned the Dalvin Cook free agency. There's reports coming out there that the Dolphins have offered him the contract, not one that he's willing to accept at this time, and going to just kind of wait things out here and see how that comes to play there. But very, very interesting that we've got, kind of three high profile names, especially in the fantasy realm the last few seasons, still hanging out there in free agency this late into it. So it'll be interesting to see those landing spots for sure. So Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and head right on in and start breaking down some teams. And guys, make sure that you're hitting up the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. And give us a follow over there. You can check out all the good stuff we got going. But let's go ahead and dive right on into this. We got the Chargers starting off 10-6 last year, 64% pass, 36% run. They're ranked 18th in points for, 8th in yards for. Head coach Brandon Staley, new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, and Austin Ekeler finished RB1 last year, 204 rush attempts, 915 yards on the ground, 13 touchdowns, 107 receptions, 127 targets, 722 yards through the air, and 5 touchdowns through the air. Thoughts on Mr. Electric, Austin Ekeler?
Austin Ekeler he's a top 3 back, right? I mean, we saw it last year, finished as RB1. He's in contention to finish RB1 again this year, right? So he's a smash. He's a smash, yes. And for whatever reason, he's going, I guess, in single quarterbacks, right? He's going kind of middle to back end of the first round. And super flex drafts, he's going the back end of the second round, top end of the third in most cases, depending on kind of how your draft board's falling. So, in a super flex format, I really, really like the idea of, if you're sitting in the 3 hole, you can start with a combination of Joe Burrow, or Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, whatever your flavor is there, assuming that Mahomes and Josh Allen are gone, and then turn around and follow that up with Austin Ekeler in the second. I like that a lot. And then you can go receiver in the third round as you kind of get that flip and start to build yourself out a nice little nucleus. But, he's going to play. He said he's going to play. He got a little bit of a bump in pay after some frustrations with asking to be traded at the end of the year, at the end of the day, he realized that the market for running backs just isn't there, regardless of what he wants. But he has been very consistent and very valuable to fantasy teams here over the last 3 seasons. So lots and lots of receptions out of the backfield, which drastically help in half point and full point PPRs. And he falls into the end zone, so it's not just catches. So that offense is very good. I think the offense should be better with Kellen Moore. It's going to be a little bit more, if it's possible, probably even a little bit more pass happy, right? Let Justin Herbert kind of air things out a little bit, but I do still think that leads to a lot of checkdowns for Austin Ekeler. They're going to keep him involved, and you can draft him and rest assured that you have a high class RB1 with the potential of finishing as overall RB1 by the time the season's over.
Yeah, I think he'll do really, really well for you, right? And he's coming off the board as that second running back, and you've seen that pretty consistently here, where it's Christian McCaffrey, Austin Ekeler, Bijan Robinson, kind of RB 1, 2, 3 right off the board, pretty consistently in almost every draft that I've seen as far as running backs go. And for those folks that stuck with Austin Ekeler, right? Like, there was a lot of panic through the first 3 weeks last year, right? Like, people were losing their mind because they drafted Austin Ekeler very early and had an RB3 finish, an RB2 finish, RB3 finish. Like, it was one of those that going into week 4, there was a lot of kind of doubt starting to seek in. Like, what do I do? Can I move this guy? What can I get? And for those managers that either stuck with him or traded, bought low kind of thing, it certainly paid off for you, where he just went on a tear to finish off the season. But you spoke a little bit ago about, he has a nose for the end zone. No player has scored more touchdowns in the last 2 seasons than Austin Ekeler, right? In 2 seasons ago, he had 20 touchdowns. He had 18 touchdowns combined last season. Like, the guy just finds a way to get into the end zone, and his passing work just absolutely puts up points for you in those PPR and half PPR formats, and can absolutely just, get the job done for you, putting up points left, right, and center. So Austin Ekeler is a guy that I really enjoy when I've got him on my rosters, and the way that I'm able to round out a team on that one. So he's a guy that if he's on the board there, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit the smash yes button and put him on my roster there. Because I think you're right. I think this is one of those that we will see him get a ton of run. And I think Kellen Moore will make this offense even a little bit more electric than it has been. So Austin Ekeler, really good at football. There's the breaking news right there. All right, let's go ahead and hit up Joshua Kelley, who was running back 6. That was not right. I tell you what, this guy on these graphics, Joshua Kelley, 64 rush attempts, 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 receptions, 25 targets, 101 yards, 0 touchdown. Thoughts on Joshua Kelley?
Pass. And it really is that simple. He's not a clear handcuff with Isaiah Spiller back there. If Ekeler were to go down, in all reality, I probably lean Isaiah Spiller a touch bit more, even though both guys didn't do diddly squat last year because Eckler's been durable, right? You haven't had to worry about Ekeler missing time. So because of the track record and how that offense flows, yeah, each player will see a couple touches each game as they spell Ekeler because he can't play every down. But more often than not, if Eckler's not in the game, I think there's something like a 70% chance they're throwing the ball, and it's not to Joshua Kelley or Isaiah Spiller. So I'm passing on both. They don't serve a purpose. I will fight for, waiver wire position and use fab budget if I have to at that point, but they're not taking up a roster spot to start the season.
Cosine. All right, I'll head right on over into the wide receiver room here. Keenan Allen finished wide receiver 71, 66 receptions, 89 targets, 752 yards, 4 touchdowns, an average of 8.9 targets per game. Thoughts on Keenan Allen?
I like Keenan Allen. I like Keenan Allen. 71? I think it's 17. I think we might have just gotten dyslexic on that one. Anyway, I don't know. I figure you're pulling it up as I see you looking at your screen.
Yeah, this guy in this graphics. He was wide receiver 42 last year.
42. Okay, 42. Missed some time. Yeah, missed a little bit of time there, right? A little dinged up. But still, when healthy and on the field, he is he's Justin Herbert's security blanket. Like, he likes to go to Keenan Allen. We still see big games out of Keenan Allen. He's scrappy. He has great hands. His catch rate is very, very good. Doesn't have the speed that he once did, right? But his big body and long arms, he's able to make the play. He will go across the middle. He's that savvy veteran who finds a way to get open, even though he's not the most athletic person on the field anymore. And the guy's – he's a gamer, right? Like, I just don't know how else to explain that. He's a gamer. He's a guy that you want to root for. Right now, he's going late enough in drafts that he could be your second wide receiver. But if you're drafting in certain areas, he could be your third wide receiver coming off the board there. And if I have to start 3 wide receivers, I wouldn't mind if Keenan Allen was my third, right? That means you basically started with Jefferson or Chase, and then turn around and filled it in with X, Y, or Z number 2, and then you waited a couple rounds and then got Keenan Allen. So I'm perfectly okay with that. I think he has a bounce back season. I think he finishes high end wide receiver 2 territory, maybe maybe high end, maybe 16, 17. I think is kind of where I see that go as he kind of rebounds back, because the Chargers are going to have a lot of balls to go around, and with him being healthy, you'll see an uptick in receptions, yardage, and touchdowns, kind of obviously. But I do think that propels him up into the middle to top end of wide receiver 2 territory. And he does have the possibility of finishing inside the top 12. Like, I don't know that it would surprise me. If you tell me he finishes wide receiver 20, I don't know that I'd be overly surprised. But if you tell me he finishes wide receiver 10, same thing. I don't know that I'd be that surprised with him as well, right? So it's not, it's not the biggest range, but for a guy you're able to draft a couple rounds later, I think there's some built-in value there for Keenan Allen, as he is kind of, he's kind of a forgotten commodity, I think is how I'm going to phrase that. So I like Allen. I don't want him as my first. I'm okay with him as my second, but I better have players all around him if he's my second. And I love him as a third or a flex. So depending on how your draft falls, what type of format you're in, everything else will obviously determine when he's coming off the board. But there's built-in upside with Keenan Allen.
Yeah, most of the cases where I'm seeing him come off the board is kind of pick 35 overall, so right there at the tail end of the third, wide receiver 17 overall. So, and I think honestly you're kind of drafting him at about his floor if he plays a full season, right? Like when you look at it, the guy is kind of just, that is where Justin Herbert throws the ball when he's throwing the ball, right? Like that is heavy target first priority in the offense there when they're passing it. Almost 9 targets a game when he's in there. Like that's the kind of volume that you got to love. Speaking of volume, right? Like he missed 7 games last year, but when he came back and when he really started going down the stretch here, he was wide receiver 4 on weeks 11 through 18. So to finish out the season, he was wide receiver 4 during that time span. And there was only one receiver during that time frame that had more targets than him. And like that speaks volume when Justin Jefferson is the only guy that has more targets than you during a 7-week span. That's a big thing to deal with. And oh, by the way, Justin Jefferson only had 1 more target than him during that time frame, right? Like, and the two were not far off when it came to overall points per game. Like there was about 1 point per game difference over that week span, to just give you an idea of how good Keenan Allen was once he was back and he was on the field and he was healthy. And I think that we can see that carry over, right? Like this is not outside the norm for what we've seen Keenan Allen do. And I think this is one of those that we can see him perform up in this. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him finish, back end or back end wide receiver 1, top end wide receiver 2, and wide receiver 17 feels like you're kind of drafting him at the floor, especially if he stays healthy, plays a full season. I'm in on that one. Let's head over to Mike Williams, who was wide receiver 31, 63 receptions, 93 targets, 895 yards, 4 touchdowns, an average of 7.2 targets per game. Thoughts on Mike Williams?
Another guy who had some injury issues last year, right? Missed a little bit of time. Mike Williams is a great best ball wide receiver. I really like him for best ball. Really don't like him for redraft. I feel like he's peaks and valleys, right? When he's hot, you love him because you see that 5-6 week stretch, right? To start a season where he's wide receiver 2, what was it, 2 years ago, Derek?
Mm-hmm.
Where he started out so hot and then faded down the stretch. You're hoping to kind of rekindle some of that last year. Injuries kind of got on that. And when Keenan Allen's out, Mike Williams does not do well being the alpha, right? Mike Williams is a good secondary option and a high secondary option, but when he's so low, he struggles to handle top end coverage. But long body can stretch the field. Contract year, if I'm not mistaken, for Mike Williams. So this is going to be one of those situations where he's got to prove it. So there is some built-in positivity with that, right? We like guys in contract years just because of how they go out to get theirs, because they know that their livelihood does depend on it. They're not comfortable, and athletes typically play better when they're not comfortable and they don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. So overall, am I going to completely avoid Mike Williams? No, I'm not going to completely avoid him, but I am going to say that it does have to be right. I think he's getting drafted, wide receiver 36, Derek? Is that accurate?
I'm seeing it as 27th wide receiver off the
27.
board.
Okay, so your rankings and mine are a little bit different here. At 27, I'm avoiding it more than not. I like some other options right there at 27. If you can kind of get a round or two discounts, which again, Doesn't happen a lot, but in some leagues, that's where the value is built in, right? That's where you draft him. If you can get him wide receiver 34, 35, then you kind of feel a little bit more comfortable with getting his assumed floor at that level. I think at wide receiver 27, you're kind of that middle of the road. I think you're a 50-50 shot of whether he's going to surpass that or fall short of that. So I would be avoiding at that point. But good receiver, not a great receiver. Struggles when he's the only guy there. But as long as Keenan Allen is healthy, I think that means better things for Mike Williams.
Yeah, it certainly seems to, right? Like when Keenan Allen's on the field, it certainly seems to draw some of that pressure off of him. But the secret to Mike Williams' fantasy success and putting up big numbers for you for fantasy is all touchdown related, right? Like where he has brilliant fantasy seasons for you, he falls into the end zone, right at that double digit mark. And when he doesn't get there, it's, wide receiver 3 territory, wide receiver back end, wide receiver 2 territory. Like it's just not there if he's not falling into the end zone. So there's a lot of things that kind of lead me a little bit on the man. I just don't know if I could pull the trigger on Mike Williams here, especially with, what else is kind of going around him, right? Because what I'm looking at, wide receiver 27 off the board, 54th pick overall. There's a lot of guys going right in and around there that I'd rather go with, especially from some of the strategies that I think I'm going to be employing this year when it comes to some of my redrafts, where it's going to look a little bit more like a 0 RB type of strategy. And J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Alexander Mattison, all going right in that same range. And so I'm more likely to be taking my second to third running back there in that 5th round than I am to go after Mike Williams there. So I think you hit the nail on the head really well. Best ball candidate. He's phenomenal for that. But season long, I just don't want to ride that roller coaster, to be 100% honest there. So that's kind of how I see that one. Let's go ahead and head on over. Quentin Johnston, the rookie drafted in the 1st round, pick 21 out of TCU. Thoughts on Quentin Johnston?
I think he's clearly – I think his rookie year he's going to struggle. So in Dynasty, I don't even love where he's drafting because he's in a lot of cases going before Addison. He's going right after JSN and before Addison. I don't love that. I'd rather have Addison over Quentin Johnston. So I would flip-flop those there personally. But, good career at TCU, pretty good route runner. He contested catch, he was okay, right? He wasn't great. And when he went up against a really stout secondary in Georgia in the national championship game, it just kind of disappeared. Now, some of the pressure on the quarterback was with that because he had a decent game against Michigan, right? And Michigan's no slouch. So he had a pretty decent game against Michigan. Georgia kind of keyed out, and he was one of those key guys that they wanted to shut down, and they did. So it'll be interesting as it translates here to the pros. I think with him being, in most cases, the 3rd or 4th option in any offensive game plan, I think that's okay. You'll probably see him with, 3, maybe 4 targets a week, something like that here to kind of start and see how he handles things. We're going to see how well he can block, right? Because if you're checking down to Austin Ekeler and Ekeler is going to see another 120 plus targets, your receivers have to block, right? That's part of the game plan and being able to get him on the field and stay on the field. So there's some possibilities there, but I like him more as kind of that Keenan Allen, I say replacement, but the Keenan Allen substitute, right? If Allen goes down, Johnston kind of fills into that role, or a year or so from now, if Keenan Allen, decides to hang it up and call it good, I think Quentin Johnston kind of steps into that more of the X than what a Mike Williams would do. And who knows, if they don't bring Mike Williams back, then he's going to be a starter next season anyway. So Dynasty, this I like the ceiling, solid receiver there. In redraft this year, though, I'm probably not grabbing him. I'm probably going to look at some other places just because if I think you can grab some guys maybe with a little bit higher upside and pass-happy offenses than I think what Quentin Johnston is going to see, only because he's truly the fourth option, maybe the fifth, depending on what you think about Gerald Everett. And I would rather look other places.
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on there. And kind of where he's going, right? He's going off the board, wide receiver 44, pick 95 overall. There's a lot of guys in that kind of range that I would be looking for more so than Quentin Johnston, right? Like Evan Ingram's going right and around there. I'd rather take my shot on Evan Ingram. Cortland Sutton, would rather take my shot on Cortland Sutton. Elijah Moore, I might take my shot on Elijah Moore, just because I think he's kind of that second option in Cleveland there versus the fourth or potentially fifth option in Los Angeles. So, or if I was switching it up and I was looking running back, AJ Dillon, Antonio Gibson, kind of both in those right in that range there, I'd probably look that route. Like there's other options in that draft capital range that I'd rather go with, and that would be what I'm going to do. I'm going to be hard pressed to have any Quentin Johnston on any of the rosters that I'm managing this year. All righty. Gerald Everett finished tight end 15 last year, 58 receptions, 87 targets, 555 yards, 4 touchdowns, 5.8 targets per game. Thoughts on Gerald Everett?
Gerald Everett is a guy who, I mean, he's a flex in tight end, right? He's a spot matchup start. He's a bye week fill in. He's a streaming guy. He is talented enough to finish inside the top 10 for tight ends, but he doesn't see enough volume. With Kellen Moore at the helm, that might change a little bit, right? They might use him a little bit more in some shorter route concepts and be able to see him get up to maybe 65 receptions instead. What was it, 55, Derek? Did I read that right?
Mm-hmm.
See him with another 5 to 10 grabs this season, which I think elevates him possibly to the bottom end of tight end 1 territory. But at the end of the day, he can put up a goose egg, right? And most tight ends, if you're not Travis Kelce, have that potential. So if you're waiting on tight end, there's nothing wrong with drafting a Gerald Everett, but you're going to be streaming a little bit, right? You're going to be looking for some different matchups because some will play into his hands and others you're going to want to avoid, much like the rest of the case. But I like it. I like the fact that he's in a high-profile offense. That helps. I like the fact that he's a big-body guy. He can get into the end zone. But what does scare me is how far down the pecking order he is, because he will get lost in game plans at times.
Yes, absolutely. This is a guy that I'm willing to take a shot on as that late round tight end. And like we've said for all the offseason, it's Travis Kelce or bust when it comes to the tight end room. If I don't get Travis Kelce, I'm gonna wait. Gerald Everett is a great wait and take that shot on tight end late kind of guy coming off the board. Tight end 19, pick 154 overall. Like that's talking in most redrafts, very second to last round of the draft type of thing. That you can rock and roll that one too, and he'll put up enough weeks for you to be able to roll that one. Strength of schedule, he's actually got a very favorable strength of schedule when it comes to matchups against the tight ends this season. 4th easiest strength of schedule out there. So there's lots of upside with Gerald Everett, but there's also a lot of things to kind of be cautious about. Biggest one being that even in a high-powered offense like we're going to see here, there's a good chance that he's the 4th or 5th option through there. So you're going to have to play the matchups right. You're going to have to, do some streaming options along the way. This is not going to be one of those that you can draft him late and set it and forget it, and he'll get up there tight end, finish inside the top 6 type of tight end. That's not what you're getting there, and draft accordingly. All right, it's going to take us down to Justin Herbert, who was QB 11 last year, 477 completions, 699 attempts, 68.2 completion percentage, 4,739 yards. Oh. All right, I don't know what happened there. Justin Herbert, QB 11, 477 completions, 699 yards. Wow, 699 attempts. 68.2% completion, 4,739 yards, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 54 rushes, 170 yards, 0 touchdowns. Thoughts on Justin Herbert?
Justin Herbert, man, how do I want to phrase this? Justin Herbert was quietly QB 11 last year. I think that's where I'm going to start with. What's kind of killing you with Justin Herbert were his rookie season and even the start of his sophomore season, he was running a little bit more. He's a little bit more efficient, right? So he's averaging basically 2 yards an attempt. His rookie season, he was averaging more than that, and he also ran for a couple touchdowns, right? It's these bonus hidden gems. Justin Herbert, honestly, I think is a little bit more effective when he's moving a little bit as opposed to just being a statue back there. Now, to his credit, Justin Herbert got rattled last year. He was dealing with injury too there for a little bit, which I think kind of stunted some of this production. I think he can be QB, maybe QB 5, maybe just outside the top 5 when it all comes down to it. But I think what's going to hold him back is if he's not going to run with the football, at least a little bit, right? And I'm, 300 yards, right? I think 300 yards should be easily obtainable because he is an athletic guy. You need 30, 20, 28, 29, 30 touchdowns, somewhere around there. The 10 interceptions don't bother me, but you have to increase the rushing numbers a little bit. So, call it 4,900 yards or something like that in a Kellen Moore offense, which I think is completely possible. So I think that you're getting about fair return with where you're drafting him, right? Because you're drafting him at 5, 6, 7, depending on, how your league mates want to draft quarterbacks. So I think you're kind of getting him right around his average, where I think his average finish is going to be. So there is no upside with Herbert, which is the downside for, where you're drafting him to where we think he's going to finish. But I think he's probably going to be a little bit more consistent. And if he can stay healthy and if his receivers stay healthy, I think you're going to see a strong finish out of Justin Herbert. I just don't know if it's quite good enough to vault him into that elite territory, right? You have Mahomes and Allen, and you can argue Burrow. I'm not putting Lamar Jackson in there because he misses so much stinking time. But Herbert's outside of that, but I think he has the ability to at least knock on the door if he puts together a full season in this new offense. I think the opportunities are going to be there. So he will at least be able to knock on the door to get invited to the party there. But I don't think he makes the cut.
Yeah, and he's got one of the most electric arms in the league right now, right? Like he's got arm talent for days, but you hit the nail on the head, right? Like somewhat limited on that top end potential based on the rushing work to it. Now, if he can get back to what he did his rookie and sophomore season, where he took off and ran the ball about 60 times for right around 300 yards. Yes, that's going to put him in that conversation. And I get that last year having that fractured rib cartilage early in the season definitely took some time to kind of get feeling right on that one. Plus Mike Williams, plus Keenan Allen missing a lot of time early in the season as well. He certainly came on strong when it was all said and done there. But this is a guy that, again, you hit the nail right on the head that you're drafting him about his peak. You're drafting about at the ceiling on this one. Will he outperform Patrick Mahomes? I don't think so. Josh Allen, probably not. Jalen Hurts, no. I don't think that he's going to put up more points for fantasy production than any three of those guys. Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, that's where he starts kind of getting into that range there. Justin Fields is going to get the legwork though, and if he stays healthy, there's no reason that we don't see Justin Fields with 800,000-900,000 yards on the ground there, plus whatever he does with his arm. So, yeah, this is one of those that at the very best you're hoping that he finishes QB5. Yeah, that's really what you're hoping for. Is you're going to draft him at 7, hoping that he moves up to QB5. It's a tough road to try and do, especially if you're talking single QB league where you're drafting him 51st overall. Like that's early 5th round. That's your flex. That's your a second or third running back, third wide receiver, like there's a lot of other options out there to kind of fill that one too. And a super flex, first round draft pick, you'd have to kind of take him in the right tier.
So where he's being drafted, would you rather go Justin Herbert, or would you rather wait 5 rounds and go Tua?
I'd rather wait 5 rounds and go Tua. I'll wait 4 rounds and go Dak.
So, just the options, right? Those are the things that you kind of have to think about when you're drafting who's going to be there and what's going on and everything else. Honestly, depending on how it goes, and I'd wait 2 rounds and go Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah,
round, right? Wait a round. So,
yeah.
I think I'd rather do that because I think Lawrence is going to use his legs a little bit more. Now, maybe because I do like Justin Herbert, and I don't want. I guess I'm not trying to bag on the guy, right? At this point, it's value. It's where can I get the value? I'm not so much worried about the flex position. Yes, it's beneficial, but I want to be competitive at my QB scoring, right? So I need to be competitive in that category week in and week out. And at least with Herbert, I'm able to do that. Can I wait 1 more round and still be competitive in the flex category? Yeah, I think so. And you could argue the same for quarterback, but it's just kind of one of those things is, knowledge is power, right? I'd love to see what this offense is going to look like a little bit in the preseason and kind of get some more reports on how it's running with Kellen Moore calling plays before I draft. So I would be probably much more comfortable with a little bit more information in, the beginning to middle of August than I am here in the middle of July, right? We need a few more weeks worth of insight information, get some good beat writers and kind of pick their brain on what's going on or be able to tune into kind of their guest spots, if you will, and see what's going on there. Because I like the upside and he's a fun guy to root for. Like, yes. I just want him to run a little bit more. That's my one knock. Like you said, he has a cannon for an arm. He's a dynamic thrower of the football. I just want him to use his legs just a little bit more. And the contrary side to that is you have Austin Ekeler to check the ball down to. Why would you risk your health?
Right.
Like, Austin Ekeler does great with the ball in his hands. Like, Keenan Allen is your security blanket, and he's happy to go over the middle for you, right? Like, Kellen Moore tends to use his tight end a little bit more. So you're going to have Gerald Everett sitting right there to do that. So there's a lot of excuses for him to not run the football. But when plays break down, I would like to see him try and grab 4 or 5 yards and get out of bounds, right, safely. I don't want him to risk injury as opposed to just throwing it away.
Fair enough. Let me set the situation for you, and I just want to see which way you would go here.
Okay.
So, single QB league, right? Kind of half point PPR, right? That's where we're looking at this. You are in the 5th round. You are on the clock. Your options look like, and for all intents and purposes, you will have gone 2 running back, 2 wide receivers, right? And you got a stud at 1 and RB2, wide receiver 2 that you're confident with and feel comfortable with, right?
Okay.
To force 4. Okay. You're in the 5th round. Justin Herbert's there. J.K. Dobbins, Alexander Madison are all there.
I would take Herbert over Madison, and I would probably use my entire clock to decide if I was going to go Herbert in the quarterback room or J.K. Dobbins, just because I do like what J.K. Dobbins can do this season. We talked about Baltimore last week, right? So go check that player profile out. You'll hear everything I had to say about him. So I do like Dobbins. So I think, and I know for the scenario and not all the I do think it would depend on who my RB2 was. Like, it would kind of depend on how confident I felt in that upside, because I feel like Dobbins has potential back end RB1 upside in a flex spot. So that's a possibility. But no, I'd take Herbert over Madison. I'm not a believer in Madison. Like, I want to be able to get Madison late. Like, if he falls to like the 8th round, right? Like, you can get him stupid late in super flex drafts for whatever reason right now. He's starting to creep up the board, but a couple weeks ago, you could get Madison so late, and it was worth it then taking him in the 10th in a super flex. Now, if you're looking at the 5th, like, I don't know, like, I think I'd pass. Like, I think I'd rather pair, if you're looking for natural stacks, like, I think I'd rather try and do something different than have Madison and go for a strange Vikings stack, unless I was getting Jefferson, if I was picking one overall. But then if I'm picking one, so if I pick, these are all the things that are kind of bouncing around my head. So I'm going to say Dobbins 1A, Herbert 1B, and then Madison's clearly C in that option.
Okay.
Leaning to my running back biases.
All right. Fair enough. I like it. Any other thoughts here on the Chargers?
No, they're a fun offense, right? Like, they're an offense that's going to put up some points. They're in a division that's going to put up some points. We'll see what the Raiders are going to do. We're going to see if Sean Payton makes the difference in the Broncos. But, God, you figure the Broncos are going to have to score more than 17.6 points per game this season, or whatever it was. I think it was even less than that. So they're, it'll be a fun year. They're a playoff team. Suffered a very embarrassing defeat after running roughshod over the Jags in the first half. Completely fell apart, which is why Kellen Moore's in there now. So we're going to see if they can improve. But I think, without looking at the Vegas odds, I think they probably have them at 10.5 wins. I mean, I think that's about right. They're going to finish, 10-7, 11-6, something like that. I feel like that's probably a good number for them. So it's a team I want a piece of. That's a phrase that we use a lot when we get into draft season. That's a team I want a piece of.
Fair enough. Yeah, and they've got a piece, and more than one piece at almost every position that you could have some fun with putting on your roster and could make for some very good roster construction there. Absolutely.
Yeah, you could argue, right? You could argue, if you're really going to wait on tight end, you could wait stupid late in the draft, pick up Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, and you would be just fine. Like, if you wanted to carry 2 tight ends and you just wanted to wait for them, Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett are 2 guys that you can wait on and wait on and wait on. Grab them both, and then you just stream between the 2, because I think Higbee's going to see a lot of run in LA this year.
Yeah. Guess what strategy I've employed across about every best ball that I've been drafting over the offseason here. Just you wait, you stack up on running backs, wide receivers, and then you get down there where everybody's kind of fought to try and take those tight ends early. You just wait, and then Higbee, Everett, stamp that one out and move along. And I've absolutely been loving those rosters that I've been constructing that way. So yes, 100% agree on that one. All right, let's go ahead and hit up the Dallas Cowboys here. We're 12-5 last year, 51% pass, 49% run, 3rd in points for, 10th in yards for. Head coach Mike McCarthy, offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer. And let's go ahead and head right into the running back room here. Tony Pollard, who had 193 rush attempts, 1,007 yards, 9 touchdowns, 39 receptions, 55 targets, 371 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Thoughts on Tony Pollard?
Obviously, no Zeke in town, so you're going to see Pollard get a little bit more run. I think 280 touches is kind of where I see this going, right? So you're going to see some more rush attempts. Maybe you get up to, 230 rush attempts or so, 50 receptions, something like that. And he's going to kind of be off and running. But, McCarthy said they wanted to run the ball more. They were pretty balanced, right? Like, when you think of the Cowboys, you're not really thinking balanced, right? Like, but they truly were one of the most balanced teams in the NFL, and we'll get into some more of that. But I like Pollard's upside, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm not sold that he's going to have everything come his way like Zeke did for so long, right? Like, I want to see how this is going to get balanced out. There's not a whole lot behind him, though. So if you want to take your stab here at Tony Pollard, he's a decent RB2 option, right? Like, that would be one of those guys for our last scenario, right? Like, if Tony Pollard's your RB2, you have Ekeler, Tony Pollard, and you're looking at J.K. Dobbins. I'm okay with that. Like, that's not a bad running back room. You can feel good about that. You have your premium A-plus player. You have your, RB2 with some upside to kind of be dynamic for that team. And then you have your flex wide receiver or your flex running back, who honestly has probably higher upside than Tony Pollard does, just because of how the offenses are going to sort out. So he's good receiving out of the backfield. I still worry about his pass pro. I just do. Like, he's just not nearly as good in pass protection as Zeke was. So I think that's going to limit his exposure on some of these third downs. But when he's fresh and when he's cooking, he looked better than Zeke last year. He looked more explosive. He was able to cut. He's able to get into the end zone, all these things. So I think you can draft Pollard as your RB2 and feel good about it. But I think you're definitely going to want at least a little bit of firepower coming behind him, whether it's your flex spot or your first two running back spots coming off the bench, to be able to protect yourself ever so slightly, just because we haven't seen Pollard be the guy for long stretches, right? Zeke was extremely durable. He played hurt, maybe not as efficient as we wanted him to be down the stretch, but he wasn't missing games. And when he did, Pollard did pretty well carrying the show. So it's he can do it, but can he do it for a season? And that's what we haven't seen yet. And that's why I would want to protect myself a little bit more if I had Tony Pollard, as opposed to who else would I want to have in that range?
Josh Jacobs is kind of in that same range. Derrick Henry kind of in that same range.
Yeah. See, and I'd rather have Jacobs personally. I think he has a much higher upside than Pollard does. Henry, you could make it. I have no problem with taking Henry over him. Just ride him till the wheels fall off, right? At some point, Henry's going to regress. But until then, I think there's a better chance of Henry finishing top 8 than Pollard finishing top 8. So I'd take my chances.
Yes. And this is one of those that I've been kind of racking my brain all off season trying to figure out what to make of what this Dallas offense is going to look like, right? Like, McCarthy was very adamant that they want to run the ball more. They want to, control the clock, time of possession. You hired the offensive coordinator that's their MO, right? Like, Brian Schottenheimer, they run the ball a ton in Brian Schottenheimer offense. The pass attempts are usually in the bottom half to bottom quarter of the league as far as pass attempts go. But the rushing attempts tend to be, for the most part, when he was in Seattle, was a top 10 rush attempt offense out there. Same thing too, right? Like, going all the way back to the Jets several times, top 10 rushing attempts out there with the Jets. St. Louis was kind of the odd thing out there, but I think that can do some very good things for Tony Pollard when it comes to a fantasy production, things like that. But Tony Pollard, where we've seen him put up big fantasy plays and big fantasy relevance there, hasn't been because of the volume play. Like, he's never been the volume guy. So that's one of those that does concern me a little bit there. He's an efficient back. Like, he's got to get that 5+, that 5.2 to 5.5 yards a carry on that one. And that's tough to do when you're carrying the ball 300 times. Much easier to do when you're carrying the ball 200 times. So I don't know how that one's going to look and go. And I just don't know that Tony Pollard is a guy that I want to trust my fantasy season on, for him to have to carry the ball 300 times to it. So this could be one of those that we see a lot more running back by committee on this than I think a lot of people are hoping. And quite frankly, where he's getting drafted at is RB like 7. No, thank you. I will go other routes there.
Yeah. Efficiency, right? That's the key word here. If Tony Pollard can remain efficient, then you will get your bang for your buck. But the inefficiencies of being the thumper, if you will, first, second down, whatever. And what do you do when you kind of get stopped up for the first half or 3/4 of the game, right? Can you get stronger as the game goes on? And that's something that we haven't seen out of Pollard. So I'm right there with you. Like, it's just there's a situation for everything, but at RB7, I can't wrap my head around that just yet. So I would have to be at a turn and double tap RB and be comfortable with that. But like you said, I'd rather have Josh Jacobs, right? Like, to me, that seems to make a little bit more sense. I would be really hard pressed to not take Jonathan Taylor over Tony Pollard as well.
Yeah, and I've
right, like I can go through it, like, and this is, need to start going through and doing some rankings, because I can list a lot of backs. Well, I feel like I can list a lot of backs that I'd rather have over Tony Pollard, just because I feel like I understand where those touches are going to come from.
All right, let's play a stop me win type of thing.
Okay.
So we're not going to hit up the first 6, right? Christian Casbury, Austin Ekeler, Bijan, Saquon, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, right? All of those guys off the board before you'd get to Tony Pollard in majority of leagues. So we're going to play the guys that following Tony Pollard at that 7 off the board: Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Breece Hall, Jamar.
Breece coming off the injury scares me, so that would be the first flag.
Okay, let's continue then. Jamar Gibbs, Travis Etienne.
Not Gibbs.
Okay.
God, not Gibbs. That's way too early for Gibbs. We covered that with the Lions. Again, another player profile for y'all to go check out.
Right. So,
So what is it, 10, 11? Like, I mean.
So Jahmyr Gibbs right now is the 13th running back off the board. So you're talking 6 down there. And there's almost 2. Well, you're talking 17 pick difference. So you're talking a full round and a half difference to that. So that I think is probably a pretty good idea as far as where that puts that. And I'm kind of right there with you. Travis Etienne would be the next name down there. And that's one of those that there's a lot of things that kind of question Etienne on that one for me, but I would love to have Travis Etienne as an RB2, where you can draft him as an RB2. To get Tony Pollard, you're going to have to draft him as an RB1, and there's a lot of other things I'd rather go with.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree. I'd rather make my bet earlier, slide him down the board to like 10, maybe 11, and quite frankly, you'd be hard-pressed, and I know I missed this show, but you'd be hard-pressed to see me draft Tony Pollard over Aaron Jones.
Right.
Just because I like how Aaron Jones is going to fit in this offense for the Packers, with what Jordan Love can or can't do, how much they're going to need him. They're not going to be driving the ball down the field like Aaron Rodgers did. So Aaron Jones is going to see a bit more run than what we've seen out of him in the past. Same thing with A.J. Dillon. They're going to need him to wear down defenses. So I think you're going to see a true LaFleur offense in Green Bay. And I think both those running backs get a boost that people aren't counting on.
Right, and it's funny that you bring up Aaron Jones. Like, that's a guy that, that's probably a similar workload as far as what Pollard needs to see, right? Like, similar situation type of deal where you're only going to see maybe 200 carries, but you can be highly efficient with it. You can get lots of receiving work out of the backfield. Like, that was one of those that it kind of reminded me of a little bit on the, Alvin Kamara a few years ago, right? Like, where you saw Alvin Kamara at his peak of, his peak in fantasy was only carrying the ball 180 to 200 times and getting some receiving work to it. But when he carried the ball, he was a 5+ a yard clip kind of guy and found the end zone to it. And
And that's the thing. You need 14 touchdowns.
Right.
If you're drafting Tony Pollard, you need 14 touchdowns.
Right. And I think,
maybe. I mean, like I said, they're third in points. I mean, they run more shots. So it's possible. We're not saying it's impossible. I think there's a clear path for these other backs. If you need, 12 to 14 touchdowns out of a running back, I think there's clear paths. I think Derrick Henry, I think Josh Jacobs are there. I think Nick Chubb is definitely there. I think Aaron Jones is there with how they're going to use him in Green Bay this year. It's just kind of one of those situations, right? You like Pollard for the perceived timeshare in that backfield, but the Cowboys really like Malik Davis. And I know everyone's all over Deuce Vaughn. And Deuce Vaughn's special teams, guys. Like, he'll get in some games and he'll have, 5 touches a game. 5 touches a game. Because they're going to, run the ball so much there in Dallas. Like, yeah, he'll see some, but don't waste your time on Deuce Vaughn.
Yes, I would agree with that thought. All right, let's go ahead and head over to the wide receiver room. Ceedee Lamb, who was wide receiver 6 last year, 107 receptions, 156 targets, 1,359 yards, 9 touchdowns, average of 9.2 targets per game. Thoughts on Ceedee Lamb?
I'd like to see more quality targets, right? Like, I'd like to see the targets actually go down a little bit and spread that out. But I would like to be able to see him to get up into 112, 115, 116 receptions in that area. And I think it's possible, right? I do think it's possible with this offense. Ceedee Lamb is going to be the clear number one option in this passing offense. I know they brought in Cooks. I know they're talking up Gallup at this point. But this is the Ceedee Lamb show, right? This is why they moved away from Amari Cooper. This is, all the things. So I like Ceedee Lamb. I would feel comfortable taking him as, really, with the way receivers are kind of falling, you could get him as your second wide receiver in a lot of different formats, right? Like, you could go Tyreek Hill, Ceedee Lamb in some leagues if you're getting a running back run. Like, and that's really where the key is, right? It's figuring out where that balance is. But you could do that. You could get Hill at 8 and then potentially turn around and get Lamb at, 16? That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, again, it's not going to happen every single draft. That is not one of the combinations that you can just put a stamp on of, yes, if I draft this guy in the first round, I know this guy's going to come back in the second. But it is possible. And if you're going with a 0 RB approach, that's a fun combination to start with, right? Go with 2 higher profile offenses and the alphas on both of those with Tyreek and Ceedee Lamb. You can at least sit back. Couple weeks may not go your way necessarily, but holy smokes, man, when those guys hit, the fireworks are going to be amazing.
No doubt. CD's one of those that it's going to your draft. The problem with CD is I don't think we'll see him get and make a challenge up there to get into the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp range, right? Like, we're not going to see him get into the tier 1 wide receiver to it, but he is a guy that is going to put up a lot of points. He's a lot of fun to watch, right? And when you look at it too, he's not the guy that's that super downfield threat. He is that yak monster, that guy that's going to catch a lot of, shorter kind of routes and make things happen along that route there, make a guy miss, get going.
He's a less dynamic OBJ when he was in New York. When OBJ was in New York and flashy and just dynamic and jaw-dropping, Ceedee Lamb's less flashy, but very much a similar skill set.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably pretty fair there. So CD's going to you're going to kind of be drafting him at both his ceiling and his floor, right? Like he's not going to outperform that. He's also not going to drop that, below that kind of range there. Like you're going to get what you draft type of thing there. And what could be a very interesting combination, right? Like you brought up the Tyreek Hill, the Ceedee, like that would be Ceedee dropping there a little bit, which certainly can happen. But here's a stack that I've been able to see and find pretty regularly out there. Going through and getting a CD and CD Amon-Ra kind of in that 11, 12 or that 12, 13 kind of turn, and be able to stack that one up there where you've got just a bunch of PPR monsters and you've got a ton of consistency out there as well. So, that's kind of the same, it's kind of the approach that you used to take with some of those running backs back in the day, where you got, two volume kind of running backs that were very consistent week in, week out. Like that kind of combination would give you that kind of just consistency throughout it. And then you could go after some fireworks, some other spots there. But CD is a guy that I would like to be able to put on my roster. I don't know that the way that things are going to fall to me on the board in a lot of cases that it'll be able to happen, but I thoroughly enjoy watching CD play. Let's go ahead and head over to Brandin Cooks, wide receiver 49, 57 receptions, 93 targets, 699 yards, 3 touchdowns, an average 7.2 targets per game. Thoughts on Brandin Cooks?
I think those numbers are pretty comparable to what we're going to see this year. It is in some packages he's going to be the first, second, or third option in multiple packages, right? And again, it's not to be flippant, but you can put him in situations where he is the number one option and he will perform, right? He's another guy he's a very good route runner. He does well with contested catches. He's a little bit more slight of frame, so some of the long rangy cornerbacks have a little bit of an easier time with him, but he's a gamer. He wants to win. He's been moved around for his talent level. He's been moved around more than any wide receiver I can think of over the course of his career, just with different teams and being traded for, first round draft picks and just kind of the craziness. But I thought it was a good signing by the Cowboys. I thought it was a good way to kind of give yourself a safety net if Michael Gallup can't stay healthy. But if he does, it's a very nice three-headed attack. Like, I like Brandin Cooks. He will take some pressure off of Ceedee Lamb. And the good thing is they both can float in and out of the slot, right? Gallup will traditionally stay outside. He's not that great at the slot. But with Ceedee Lamb and with Brandin Cooks, they can float in and out. So when they want one of those guys to specifically have off coverage, they're going to be able to scheme that up. So give the Cowboys a little bit more of a dynamic passing attack on third and medium, third and long, where it's not just, okay, double cover CD, and we feel like we have this figured out. So I like Cooks. I like him late. I like him in best ball, some of these ranges. But, yeah, if I can get Cooks, as my fifth wide receiver, I'm not hating that. Like, I think there's some upside there as we see how the season unfolds. I'm seeing if Gallup can play a full season, because there's a good chance that while Cooks and Gallup kind of fight for that wide receiver 2 spot on the Cowboys, Gallup needs to stay healthy. Otherwise, it's clearly going to be Brandin Cooks. And then, not that you get him on a discount, but then his value has upside built into it at that point when they're not fighting for that third guy to get those targets. So he trying to think through this passing offense here a little bit, and the Schottenheimer deal is interesting to me because I think Ceedee Lamb is different than DK or Tyler Lockett, but I think Brandin Cooks does fit that Tyler Lockett role fairly well if you're going to try and find where some of those matchups are. And CD's just kind of a different beast. Like, he just has a different skill set, so he's not a true comp to Lockett or DK. But nevertheless, I think Brandin Cooks is a pretty good comp to Tyler Lockett, just, a year and a half older, basically, something like that. So got to have on your roster. Again, he's a good depth piece. I like him in best ball. especially because I don't have to worry about what week he's going to have where he will go for 120 and 2 touchdowns, right? Like we know this is going to happen. But I couldn't tell you whether it's going to be week 1, week 12, week 16. Like, I couldn't tell you. So I do like it for best ball to be able to kind of not have to worry about it.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm even in on Brandin Cooks in a best ball format. Like last year, 2 weeks out of everything that would have been usable for best ball format.
That was Houston,
right?
Though, brother. Like that was Davis Mills. At least you have Dak.
That's true. You got Dak, but I mean, even when the guy sees about 100 targets on a season, I would expect to see better than one wide receiver 1 week and one wide receiver 2 week, and then everything else was wide receiver 3 or worse. Brandin Cooks, and even thinking back to when we covered Brandin Cooks in the past, like Brandin Cooks is a guy that'll have some blow up weeks there, and will certainly be able to do some things for you. And maybe the fact that he's not having to be the primary target on this offense actually helps him out along that way, to the point where he's probably he's going to be seeing better quality of targets, right? With the fact that it's Houston, versus Dallas. So there's a lot of that, but okay, you talked me into it. I can get down on a best ball on him this year, but I'm not looking to put him on any of my redraft rosters, just simply from the standpoint where he's kind of going right now in the draft capital there. There's a lot of other guys kind of in that similar range that I'd rather go with. I'd rather look at, I'd rather take Dak Prescott as the QB if I'm in a single QB type of league than Brandin Cooks. I'd rather look at like an AJ Dillon, even Antonio Gibson, Cortland Sutton. There's a lot of guys kind of in that range that I'd rather go with. So probably won't see much of Brandin Cooks on any of my redraft rosters, but still a very fun player to look at and watch. All righty, let's head over to Michael Gallup, wide receiver 68, 39 receptions, 74 targets, 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, an average of 5.3 targets per game. Thoughts on Michael Gallup?
Man, I want to like Michael Gallup. I really do. And it just hasn't played out well for me. Now, the fact that I like Michael Gallup means I will pass Brandin Cooks to draft Michael Gallup because I get such a discount, right? There is basically, at least here on Underdog, you go from 88 to 135. Like, that's a big discount to be able to draft a guy who is probably going to have similar numbers, just in a, they're going to find them different ways, right? So they're going to use him. He's going to be on the outside. He needs to continue to work on his contested catch rate and being able to bring the ball down in coverage. But I'll take the discount, right? 50 spots. I mean, I will take the discount there to draft Michael Gallup in hopes that we can catch some lightning in a bottle here, if that means I'm able to go other places instead of Brandin Cooks, 88 overall, roughly. Like you said, Dak, drafting Dak, drafting Tua if you want a piece of Tua there. Like, there's some different things you can do and then get your receiver later on. So I like Gallup. His potential has always been greater than his performance. But this is going to be kind of my swan song on Michael Gallup. Either he's going to show out and show that he can be a true number 2 in this league, or he's going to be kind of fading off and say la vie into the sunset, because the players going around him. Nico Collins is going just before him. Darnell Mooney is going a few picks before him. Rondell Moore. There's no way I'm drafting Rondell Moore ahead of Michael Gallup. Like, I just don't like the Arizona offense at all, especially with kind of the flex that Kyler's in. And then you have Mingo, Thielen, Rashee Rice. Like, I could take a flyer on Rice. Like, just to have a piece of Kansas City, right? Like, same type of thing. I think these guys are it makes sense that their ADPs are so close together. But overall, this is it. This is my last shot for Gallup. So, I will take flyers on him. I will draft him late and pass on Brandin Cooks intentionally. But so help me God, if he burns me this year, I am not drafting him anymore.
Fair enough. Some very promising reports coming out of Dallas on Michael Gallup, and his kind of return to form there a little bit, right? He had the ACL tear not last year, but the season before, missed the first 4 games on that one, and really kind of, again, took some time, really didn't return to form last season, which is not uncommon, right? We see a lot of these guys that suffer like an ACL injury. It almost takes, that next season they come back, not so great. And then the season after, they tend to return to form there a little bit more so, right? Like that's just what we've kind of seen in the past there. And I think that that's where we see him do this. Now, the other thing that I think he sets up really well in a Schottenheimer offense from the standpoint that Schottenheimer's pass game is also going to utilize a lot of play action type of pass. Michael Gallup is a down the field type of receiver. So I do like the fact that we could see some play action pass up and over the top to try and hit Gallup there. And, we see some very big play type of thing there. So I'm in. And the fact that I can get him, 50 picks later than where Brandin Cooks is going, sign me up. I'm in on that one. So a guy that I will probably not hesitate much when I get down there around like pick 150 is about where I'm seeing him go in a lot of leagues. So that's a late round dart throw that I will absolutely take. All right, let's hit up tight end. Jake Ferguson, tight end 47, 19 receptions, 22 targets, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns, average 2.2 or 2.0 targets per game. Thoughts on Jake Ferguson?
Pass. The tight end room in Dallas is very murky right now. There's 3 guys. They like Ferguson, but they like Hendershot. And then they went out and drafted a tight end in the second round. Like, I'm staying away from the Dallas tight end room. Quite frankly, there's too much noise right now. I'll be staying tuned to kind of how things shake out, where the depth chart truly lies, which one of these guys kind of emerges in camp and what you see going forward. But as it stands, I'm just going to pass. I'm going to look for, I'm probably already had my first tight end, right? Like yes, I'm waiting on tight end, but I'm not waiting this long. So I've already had my first tight end, and my second, I'm looking for, sneaky upside if I'm going to have 2 on my roster. Otherwise, he's a streaming possibility after we kind of see what the breakdown and target share of these tight ends is going to look like.
Right. And I'm trying to remember the last tight end that was fantasy, like really fantasy relevant season long in a Brian Schottenheimer offense. And I can't do it. I'm drawing blanks on that one.
No, because Seattle always ran 3, just like what Dallas is going to do, right? Like all these guys are going to end up with, 27 catches, 2 touchdowns, and, 300 yards. Yeah.
And I think right there, right, it's a cannibalization that's going to happen here. So I'm out on the Jake Ferguson. I'm out on Dallas tight end here. All right, let's head over to the QB. Dak Prescott, 261 completions, 394 attempts, 66.2% completion percentage, 2,860 yards, 23 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 45 rushes, 112 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. Thoughts on Dak Prescott?
He's going to finish better than QB 18. You got to expect that he's going to be healthy. I think he's going to finish back into QB 1 by the time it's all said and done with, right? Like, I think that there's enough weapons there. He'll be successful. I think him not having to throw the ball as much potentially will, it'll be more than last year, provided he stays healthy, but, he's not going to have to step back and sling it 40, 45 times a game. So the efficiency, he has weapons around him. He does use his legs a little bit, not a ton, but he does run for some touchdowns. He's not afraid to pull the ball down and get into the end zone if that's what the defense gives him. And the value is right. You can pick him up in the 9th or 10th round, right? And you can kind of play some of those options off. Now, with Schottenheimer being the coordinator, I'm not going to lie, I'd rather have Tua than Dak. But I think Tua in this offense, and with how I see that offense kind of going in Miami with so much speed and what they're going to do, I think Tua's upside is just higher than Dak's, right? Like if they're the same baseline quarterback, both have missed some games due to injury. I like Tua's wide receivers a little bit more because Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are better than Ceedee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Brandin Cooks. And I don't think Miami has as good of running backs currently as Tony Pollard, right? So they're not going to be as efficient on the ground, in my opinion. So I'd take Tua over Dak, but it's close, and I can't blame anybody either way. I think Dak playing for the Cowboys, his ADP is naturally going to be just a touch higher than probably what it should be.
Yeah, I mean last year, right? Like Dak missed 5 games early in the season, right? Like played week 1, got banged up there, and then missed several weeks there. So from when he came back though in week 7 through the end of the season, he was quarterback 6 through those weeks, and that's that's where we can kind of expect Dak to play at his back end QB1 range. So again, right, like when we look up at the season and we see that Dak finishes anywhere from QB 7 to 12, not going to surprise me at all there. Now, where he's coming off the board is QB 10. So I feel like at this point you're drafting him kind of right there at his floor, and he has some upside there. So I wouldn't necessarily mind going the Dak Prescott route, especially in single QB leagues. But again, to your point, right? Like Dak and Tua are kind of right there next to each other. And right now, Tua probably has a little bit better upshot on that one, especially since Mike McDaniel really likes to kind of go out there and throw the ball versus Schottenheimer really tends to play it the run game more so there. So not going to surprise me if the pie is bigger down there in Miami, right? Like a phrase we like to use a lot, but not going to surprise me if the pie is bigger and the passing pie is bigger down there in Miami. So I'll take the guy with the bigger volume, and Miami's got the playmakers to the point where every single guy was a one touch type of guy that can floor it from anywhere on the field. So single missed tackle and it's off to the races with some very, very speedy guys there. So you may have talked me into the Tua over Dak dilemma there that I was facing. So I like it. Any other thoughts here on them boys?
No, America's team, right? See how they can do that. Defense continues to improve. They're in a tough division. Got to obviously knock off the Eagles to win the division title here this year and compete with what the Giants are doing as well, as they're trying to make some strides forward. So it should be a good division to watch this year. Should be a lot of fun. And like I said, plenty of fantasy pieces, right? Maybe a little bit different with Schottenheimer being the offensive coordinator than what we've seen in the past, but Mike McCarthy's still going to have some influence in it. So I don't know that you're going to see quite the Seattle offense in Dallas. I think you're going to honestly, I think it's going to look a lot like it did this year as far as the 51% pass, 49% run. It's all about efficiencies.
You very well could be right there, and it'll be interesting to see how this one comes to play. Any kind of final thoughts out there? I'm sitting here looking at this going, I don't know what to do. We're an hour, we're like 45 minutes ahead of schedule on most nights. So
blew through it. Awesome. We're getting early bedtime so I can get to the other JOB in the morning. So no, thank you for everyone tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the Twitters, all the socials, right? And I'm sure I missed one, but at Good Old Boys FF. But we appreciate everybody's support. As we get into draft season, shoot us these questions like, hey, these are the guys that I'm looking at. What do you think? Or hey, as I'm doing my rankings, right? Do your own rankings, but as you're doing them, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Like, put a second set of eyes on it. We are more than happy to answer any of these questions that you guys put out to us.
Absolutely. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us. We're going to call it a night and get the Betty buys early here. So that's going to do it for us He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Make sure that you hit up the youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Click the subscribe button. Best way to support this independent podcast. And make sure that you're getting all of those player profile videos, which will be dropping here in the next, I'm going to say probably the next 2 weeks is about go time on those. So that's going to do it for us, though. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloo.